Pretty much, we're like Motorhead meets Boy George.
Full and Blooms, inside the album. In the mid-'80s, Poison was just another hungry band clawing their way up the Sunset Strip. Their dream was simple: make a record that would capture the wild, electric spirit of their live shows that would catapult them into rock stardom. In 1983, Poison, originally known as Paris, was a hard-working bar band from Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, featuring Bret Michaels, Dall, Rikki, Rockett, and guitarist Matt Smith. Hungry for a shot at stardom, they realized their small-town scene would never be able to deliver. Inspired by the explosive glam metal movement in Los Angeles, the band packed up and drove across the country, chasing the promise of record deals and rock glory.
Basically met Bret and Rikki. We met at a Dairy Queen. And we just clicked, you know. We had the same ideals, you know. I played in a lot of garage bands, but I never met anyone who's willing to sell their soul and live for rock and roll. And, you know, you always play with someone, well, they had a side job, or they could only make a rehearsal this day or that day. And I wanted to play with people that didn't have jobs, that wanted to play original music, and wanted to be rock and roll stars, quite frankly.
Vicky Hamilton played a pivotal role in Poison's early Los Angeles days, stepping in as the band's first manager. Drawn to their dynamic and flamboyant energy, Hamilton helped guide the band through their initial showcases and industry introductions, leveraging her connections from managing other Sunset Strip acts. During a Full and Bloom interview, Hamilton talked about her introduction to Poison.
There was this girl named Anne. She worked at A&M or something, and she called me. I was living in Malibu at that point after my striper ordeal. And she said that they were having a showcase for Poison, and I was like, God, I love the name. After coming off a striper, I was like, please, bring on some Poison. But I went to the showcase. I really loved them. They were very fun and dynamic and girly and all those things I liked about the 80s, and I started working with them. It was pretty soon after they had just landed here from Pennsylvania.
By 1984, Poison began searching for a recording engineer who could help them create professional demos that would catch the attention of record labels. At the time, Jim Faraci was a staff recording engineer at The Village, a studio that encouraged its engineers to bring in bands during downtime. Faraci's journey with Poison began in true rock and roll fashion, with a knock at his parents' door.
I started working with Poison in 1984. They were actually big Rat fans and saw my name on the back of Out of the Cellar and pulled up into my parents' driveway in a blue Chevette, the whole band in one car looking for me. They got a hold of me and they told me, I remember Bret telling me that they were the greatest band I would ever see. I went to see them live and I really did like them, so we started working together, started working on their songs and demos and trying to get them a record deal in LA.
At that time, do they have the other guitar player, or is CeCe in the band?
No, Matt was still in the band.
We all lived with a bunch of cockroaches in a one-bedroom apartment we couldn't afford the rent on, Rikki Rockett said. We had 3 years of that. There were a lot of times we thought we might have to come home with our tails between our legs. Bands like ours weren't getting signed at the time. The Motley Crue and Rat explosion had already happened, and labels had signed up all these bands who hadn't done well.
They had this little card table dining room. The funny piece was the 100 industry people and the 100 girls, and they'd write their numbers on the wall, and the girls' list got really long and kind of went off the wall, and the girls would call up and say, can we come over? And they would say, okay, well, if you bring a bag of groceries or we'll clean, then you can come over.
Sure, we'd have girls buying our groceries, Dall said. If they wanted to come hang out with the band and stay over at the house, then yeah, that's what it took. We were hungry. We'd get money from gigs, but we used that to keep the band going.
We played the Relentless Club circuit in Hollywood, which is one of the toughest circuits to break in the world because there's so many bands move out to Los Angeles to try to make it that the competition's so tough.
At the time, time, they were probably the most popular unsigned band in Los Angeles.
And this is like 84, huh?
84, because I think Out of the Cellar came out in 84, so this is probably late 84. And they all lived in the rehearsal room that they worked in. Once CeCe joined the band, they all moved into this rehearsal room. Before that, they had an apartment on Franklin that they all lived in, and we used to all hang out in. And then they moved to the rehearsal room once CeCe came into the band. But that was very common in LA at the time. Most of the young bands lived in the rehearsal space.
It was hard for me to get industry people to take them seriously off their demos. They weren't great musicians or songwriters, and they got better with time. But it was really about the show.
I guess we kind of had a naive belief in ourselves, Bret Michaels said. We knew between myself, Rikki, and Bobby what we wanted the band to be, a combination of the glam look and the party sound. We thought music kind of sucked. It had no energy. We were young, and we did have the energy, and we just wanted to be rock stars, man. We had this guitarist, Matt Smith, who came out with us, but he didn't stick around too long. He got his girlfriend pregnant. He was very cool about it. He said, I'm going to be a father, and we're living like pigs. I need to get a job and support my family. And he was right. We were living like pigs. We lived behind a dry cleaners in a warehouse, but it was a sad moment for us when he left. While Smith was still in the band, Poison launched a high-stakes search for a new guitarist. The final auditions came down to two future legends, Slash and CeCe DeVille. They were both great candidates, Smith recalled, but I favored Slash. I barely remember the CeCe audition, but when Slash came, we started playing Aerosmith's Last Child, which was a fun memory. On his Poison audition, Slash said, I was living in LA and I'd just gotten done working in a band with Axl called Hollywood Rose. Steven Adler was in the band as well. I just quit. I told Axl I couldn't handle it anymore. Matt Smith, the original guitar player for Poison, who was actually a pretty cool guy, he was moving back to Pennsylvania. He goes, you should try out for Poison. I hated Poison, but in those days you did whatever you had to do to keep moving. I thought about it for a while and I finally decided to put pride aside and go check it out. At least I'd be playing gigs. They were the biggest band on the Strip at the time. I ended up being one of two guitar players left that they were going to pick from. There was no denying that I could play the songs, but there was an issue about makeup and stuff. Bobby Dall asked me what kind of shoes I was going to wear. I was like, what? As I walked out of the audition, CeCe DeVille was walking in. He had on pancake makeup and a ton of hairspray. I actually remember thinking right then, that should be the guy. The next day, I got a call from Bobby and he said, you know, you're great and all, but I think we're going to pass on you and go with the other guy. Had it worked out and I had gotten the gig, it wouldn't have lasted long. I wasn't right for them. I was in a couple of bands after that, and then we started Guns N' Roses.
CeCe was really a prolific writer, and then when he got together with Bret's lyrics, it really clicked. I mean, it really took off. He brought a really high energy to the band. It wasn't just Bret at that point. It was Bret and CeCe who could really play off each other at that time. And the rest of the guys were really strong, and it just worked. He just fit their persona perfectly.
Although impressed by Slash's playing, Rikki Rockett saw something special in CeCe DeVille. And then the other guy showed up, Rockett recalled, and the dude's got hair everywhere, and he's like, and this is before he's even plugged in. He's like, man, I ain't playing any of your songs. I've got a riff you can use, and the riff he's got is Talk Dirty to Me. We didn't want a hotshot Yngwie type. We wanted a rock East Coast guy. And then CeCe auditioned, and he just made more sense than Slash did. So it was a tough decision because we all liked Slash. But Slash was pissed. He was really pissed off about it. So there was that rivalry between Guns N' Roses and Poison because of that. But that's long gone. I have to be honest, at the time I argued for Slash, admits Michaels. This was before he was in Guns N' Roses, obviously, but he had that same look back then. He was very cool. He had that kind of Rolling Stones type cool that he still has. He came into our rehearsal room, and he played every song we had note perfect. Slash wanted to have a dual guitar player situation, and we weren't looking for that. CeCe came in with Talk Dirty to Me already written, but me and him didn't get along from the start. Rikki and CeCe loved each other, but Bobby and me couldn't stand him. There was just something about him. we made the right decision for us, but it's been a fiery ride.
But anyway, that's how me and CC met. We were auditioning guitarists, and I handed him a flyer of our band and said, would you be interested in trying out? And he looked at the flyer, laughed, wrinkled it up, and threw it in my face. Needless to say, he's now on our team. You know what I'm saying?
With Cece on board, Poison's chemistry ignited. The band dove headfirst into the LA club scene, cutting demos and hustling for every gig and dollar. Their hard work eventually caught the attention of legendary manager and record label owner Don Arden. Michael said Sharon Osbourne's father, Don Arden, had a record label at the time called Jet Records. He came down, and since it was a big record label, we thought we should have food and drinks for them. We got a fold-out table, and we went and got bologna sandwiches. We cut them up and set all this stuff out, thinking we were going to impress them. They come, and Don listens to a couple of songs, and he gets up halfway through the song. I jumped off this tiny stage at SIR. I go, where are you going? We got food, and we got 5 songs we got to play. Songs like I Won't Forget You and Talk Dirty to Me, hits off the Look What the Cat Dragged In album. We play I Want Action, and then we were halfway through Talk Dirty to Me. He stands up with one of the people that came with him, and he goes, I'm sorry, I just don't hear the nucleus of a hit in that song. I'm like, we haven't even got to the chorus yet. They left, and at that moment I said, guys, I'm done. Let's go pool our money together that we can save up. And it was like $5 to $6 grand, and we went into the studio.
My deal was I would produce all their demos, and then I would produce the record, or they would have to buy me out of the record if they got a deal, and for some reason I wasn't involved in the record. We're cutting songs left and right. In fact, I still have the multi-track tape in my garage from those sessions.
Incredible. From the Look What the Cat Dragged In, or just the demo sessions?
From the demos itself. I think the 4 songs we did all made the record, if I remember correctly.
Following the recording of the demos, Atlantic Records entered the picture, and while a deal appeared to be on the horizon, the label ultimately decided not to sign the band.
Once we cut the demo, as I said, they were supposed to sign with Atlantic. Atlantic had signed Rat, and they really liked Poison, and literally the day we were supposed to sign, Atlantic changed their minds and pulled out because they didn't think the band was strong enough. Kenny Austin, who signed Rat, Kenny loved the band, and he was ready to go, and we were already making plans on recording and dates and everything. And then at the last minute, Atlantic changed their mind. And I mean, literally the next day, Wes Hine called Bret and said, hey, I heard your Atlantic thing fell through. And he said, yep. He said, well, we'll take you and we're ready to go. And it was literally that fast that we turned around and they were signed to Enigma and off we went.
They had done a demo deal with Atlantic and they passed. I kind of forced them to make a decision, and I think Bret blamed me because they passed, but they weren't going to get off the dime, and I kind of felt that. They were quite a handful. It's like I fought with Bret all the time, and I was like, I don't want to do this. It's like I sold my contract to Howie Huberman. And then, of course, Tom Wally steps in and, gives them a big deal. And I was like, okay. But whatever.
Wow. So you bailed out before they signed?
Yeah, I did. Okay.
I think the Atlantic deal was right around there at that same moment, wasn't it? Or that was quite a bit before?
They passed, and then, and then they were signing with Enigma. They did sign with Enigma, and then...
But pretty quick after that,
yeah,
right?
Pretty quick after that.
So you were involved, though, at the time of the trying to get the deal with Atlantic, right?
Yeah, I was involved with the Atlantic thing, but not the Capitol thing.
So was there a falling out because of the Atlantic deal?
That was a piece of it, and I just didn't get along with Bret. Let's leave it with that.
Okay. But you're the one who bailed out on that.
Yeah. I bailed out after Bret had his fans at the country club chanting "fuck management." I think it was a mutual parting of the way. And he said a lot worse things to me, which Bobby Dall said to me, well, why didn't you talk about that? And I'm like, I don't really want to talk about Bret calling me.
After their brush with Atlantic Records that ultimately led nowhere, the group took a leap of faith and signed with independent record label Enigma Records. The pivotal decision, born out of persistence and desperation, would not only launch their debut album, but also set Poison on a path to becoming one of the defining acts of the 80s.
That was the first time I had worked for Enigma. I had never worked for them before, and I didn't know the Hine brothers, who I still talk to quite a bit. And they just called me up and they said, well, you've been working with the band all along. I had never produced a record, and that's when CeCe was friends with Rick Browde, said, would you mind working with him? And I said, hell, if it gets the record made, I'm fine with it.
During a Full and Bloom interview, producer Rick Browde talked about how his friendship with Scorpions drummer Herman Rarebell led to him working with Poison.
The last tour that I did with Ted Nugent, where we were doing a live album, Intensities, the opening acts, both on their first American tour, were the Scorpions and Def Leppard. And because all of us hated Ted, we always hung out with the opening acts. And Herman and I became really fast friends, and at the time. And so when he would always come over to New York. He would live at my house. Then when I came out he asked me to come do his solo album. So I was living with him in Redondo Beach. And then when I went to do Victory, I was living at his apartment in Hanover, Germany. We just became friends. And then he got involved with this woman who was a former Penthouse centerfold and hooker, and named Tammy Ventrella. And she was having an affair with Bruce Johansson, who was CC DeVille. And as a favor to her, I did Poison. Like everything you see out of Los Angeles music in those days, even though I was living in New York and sort of straddling New York, Germany, and Los Angeles, everybody was in every other band and knew everybody else. It was just like one giant petri dish. And so, people were having sex with various things. So Bruce Johansson was having sex with Tammy Ventrella, who was married to Herman, and, was like begging me to go see her boyfriend's band.
Poison was set to hit the studio, but faced a serious challenge: how to make the most of their limited budget. Browde's resourceful approach to stretching every dollar led to an unexpected twist.
We did the album at Music Grinder Studios in Hollywood, which isn't there anymore, but the whole album cost $23,000. That was the budget, including everything: travel, producer's advance, mixing. The way we got it was Stevie Nicks had booked out the studio, but she was so coked out she would never show up. So we made a deal for cash to the guys that worked at the studio. They didn't tell the owner that we were there, I'm sure, and they just kept the cash. But if she ever showed up, which she never did, we would have to vacate the place really quickly. That was how we were able to do an album.
Music Grinder, you got a 24-hour day in a really good sounding room with a Trident, Series 80 console, and it was $1,000 a day. So we would go in there. We'd start at 10 in the morning and work till 2. And we cut that entire record, the entire Poison record. I think our total recording bill was $10,000. We cut a song a day, start to finish. Monday is Talk Dirty to Me. Tuesdays, I Won't Forget You. Wednesday, very well rehearsed. We'd been rehearsing for a long time together. They knew these songs backwards and forwards. It was just a matter of getting the performances. Actually, we got the drums from the Scorpions drummer, lent us his drums. Herman lent us drums because Rick Browde knew them. And Ricky's drums were thrashed, and we just didn't have the budget to go rent good drums. So Herman lent through Rick. We got a set of drums from Herman that sounded great.
What was it like working with Rick on that album?
It was okay. Rick was not, he came in late, and he was involved, but he wasn't deeply involved. Let me put it that way. He was there. He helped out, and he got us the drums, which was really cool. He had some stuff, but he wasn't into it nearly. I had been with the band for at least a year by that point. So it was a different relationship, but we didn't have any problem with it.
We did a couple of weeks of rehearsal where I had to rearrange everything and stop them from being a heavy metal band because they weren't going to be Kiss. And realizing that we had to put as many gimmicks in there as possible. We'd do a song a day, start to finish, basically, because that way we didn't have to break down, and we just kept everything going. And the drummer was really, really horrible. Really nice guy. I mean, I can't say anything bad about him, but he wasn't very, none of them were musical virtuosos except for Bruce. Bruce was the only competent one, but, none of them had really recorded. Bruce kept talking to me about leaving the band because he had another band that he was thinking of joining and things like that. It's just, we were in the right place at the right time. It was a triumph image over substance. Bret Michaels was incompetent, but it worked. I mean, and in a lot of ways, I feel that we were kind of a landmark album because we opened up the music business. We removed the barrier of the barrier to entry used to be being able to sing in tune and have talent, and we removed that.
If you wanted to come to the studio and hang out, you had to bring food or booze, or they wouldn't let you in. So we would have, every night would be these young girls showing up with pizzas and beer at the door of Music Grinder where they had a camera, and we could see who it was, and then they would decide whether or not to buzz them in. The thing I remember the most, and this will sound weird, is that they were really fun. We had a really good time because we were all really friendly. The guys were just they were so excited to be making a record and so confident that they knew it was going to be great. Because you got to remember, everyone was telling them they were shit for years. And they got no respect in LA because they were glam and they weren't good players and blah, blah, blah. I got to tell you, Poison was the hardest working band outside of the studio and the rehearsal room that I had ever seen. They were constantly out promoting themselves and getting shows. They deserved everything they got. They worked their asses off nonstop, those guys. They were an incredibly driven band.
The whole reason we had Rick Browde produce it was because we didn't really know how a professional studio worked, Michael said. We had enough money for about 8 days initially, so that was it. We had to get it done. I'll be honest, I never liked Rick Browde. He irritated me, but he did kind of get the sound down. I knew what we should sound like, but we had never been in a full studio before, so that was the service he performed for us. Browde has said that we just wanted to sound like a metal band, but that's patently ridiculous. Do we look like a metal band? We wanted the record to be the soundtrack to the best, most killer party you could go to.
And we recorded at such odd times of the night and day that by the time we were done with the album, we looked like What the Cat Dragged In, so the name was quite appropriate.
When it came to the mix of the album, Browde knew exactly who to call to polish the band's sound for the big time. Recording engineer and producer Michael Wagener. I got a call from Rick Browde, Wagener said. Hey, can you mix this album for me? There was no budget, and it was not in good shape when I got it. It's a small miracle that it ended up where it did, sound-wise. They brought it to me and said, here's the deal. We can give you 1 point for the mix or a $5,000 flat fee. I listened to it once and said, I'll take the $5,000. That was probably the biggest mistake of my life because the album went on to sell over 4 million copies. To this day, that's the standing joke when I walk into Poison's dressing room. I didn't see the fact that they were a fun band and that attitude sells records.
Poison does not tell you how to look, how to dress, how to act, or anything. All we're saying is when you come to the show with our band, we're going to entertain you to death. You know what I'm saying? We're gonna go out there, and that's all we ever want to get across. As long as they leave with a smile and humming one of our songs, we're content.
The album cover for Look What the Cat Dragged In featured the band in full makeup and teased hair, forehead shots in which Poison had, as promised, pushed everything to the limit. The band leaned into the controversy, turning their flamboyant image into a calling card. We wanted to come out and be as outrageous as we could, recalled Michaels. We wanted to get noticed and stand out. We wanted to shock people, so we went as over the top as possible. It was Athena Bass, Tommy Lee's sister, who did the cover for us. We couldn't have made ourselves look that good. She kind of knew everybody and was connected. She was far too beautiful and clever for us at the time, too. We put up the money to make Look What the Cat Dragged In with a company called Enigma Records, Michael said. It was two brothers. They had a distribution warehouse where you could print the albums and ship them. We were sitting in a warehouse, shrink-wrapping our own cassettes and albums. So if you had Look What the Cat Dragged In, I may have been the one who shrink-wrapped it.
Enigma was in financial difficulty, so they sold to Tom Wally at Capitol, who later became Interscope's big guy. And Capitol had they dropped everything their A&R because they were they were like MCA, really shitty label at that point. And so they had nothing to, until their new A&R people's acts delivered their albums, they had nothing to work on. There was a guy, they had a promotion with a guy named Walter Lee, who later during that period got arrested for using a cattle prod on his promotion staff, and things like that. It was all just scandals and this, that, and the other thing.
We started shooting our own videos, Michaels continued. We shot Talk Dirty to Me in a warehouse. We had no money, and the director never even showed up. So it's just 2 cameras. We invited our friends, and they shot us having a blast. The same song that didn't have a nucleus of a hit became a top 10 song. We were the first independent record to break 3 million copies. Looking back, Michaels described the whirlwind as surreal, recalling how he went from an unknown to being recognized on the street in a matter of months. The album, which Michaels once called a glorified demo, had become the biggest selling release in Enigma's history.
And they made those videos, more girls, more things, and Poison were calling in to MTV. They were hiring people to call MTV, and things happened.
Look What the Cat Dragged In wasn't without controversy. After its release, the band faced lawsuits over the origins of some of their biggest hits.
Cry Tough was actually a song that I wrote with a German guy named Mario Timmer. We run a song called Out in the Streets, and it's dead note for note. It was just an arrangement with their lyrics on it. But I thought it was a good anthem. There was all sorts of lawsuits on that album, and they were all settled quietly behind. And I had to sue Poison to get my money because of the lawsuits about their plagiarism.
You had a lawsuit with them?
Yeah. Settled out of court. There's a non-disclosure agreement that I had considerably more money than, they tried to, it was a lawyer's wet dream, that album.
But didn't you get points being a producer? Didn't you get points?
I did, but I had to go to court to get paid.
To get paid on your points?
Yeah, because, Smallwood and the band tried to blackmail me into supporting in their plagiarism suits. And I was like, sorry, I'm not going to do that.
In the late 80s, Swedish glam band Easy Action filed a lawsuit against the group, alleging that Poison had copied the chorus of the band's 1983 song We Go Rocking for their own hit single, I Want Action. Easy Action and Europe guitarist Key Marcello said, Rick Browde told me he brought the Easy Action album to the studio when he did the Poison album, and he put on We Go Rocking and suggested the band make a cover of it. And they said, it's a Swedish glam band. Who's gonna know? And they just ripped us off. When Poison played at Sweden Rock Festival, they had a press conference and somebody asked, what about Key Marcello? What about Easy Action? What about We Go Rocking? And they said, we never heard of any of those. Regarding how Easy Action ended up receiving a financial settlement in the case, Marcello said, the publisher for We Go Rocking is Warner Chappell Music. I'm listed as the 100% writer of the music, and there's 3 of us who are credited for the lyrics, the singer, the bass player, and me. The thing is, I was so busy when this thing happened. I didn't sue Poison. It was Warner Chappell Music that sued them and threatened to take them to court. It was a really dumb deal. Instead, they made a settlement out of court. But as you know, when you do a settlement, they don't have to publicly admit that they did anything wrong. If we would have taken them to court, I would have been a co-writer on their song, which I think would have been fair. That's how you admit you've done something wrong. Because if I had been listed as a co-writer on I Want Action, every time they do a best of Poison album and the song is on there, some money goes to me. It doesn't now. We just got this sum of money, a settlement out of court. If there's one regret I have, it's not dragging their sorry asses to court. In 2011, former members of the Chicago band Kid Rocker accused Poison of plagiarizing songs like Talk Dirty to Me, I Won't Forget You, and Fallen Angel. The lawsuit claimed that guitarist CeCe DeVille had accessed Kid Rocker's demo tapes while auditioning for the band in 1984, and later brought those songs to Poison, helping fuel the band's breakthrough success. According to the suit, DeVille was loaned master recordings of Kid Rocker's songs for the audition. During a Full and Bloom interview, when Kid Rocker's Billy McCarthy was asked about the lawsuit, the drummer said,
the only thing we can't talk about is a Poison lawsuit.